Greetings, adventurers. Here we are back at the Questline Tavern. Try to do episode 2 here. Tonight I have some fun stuff. I hope that everyone enjoys. I'm going to get into some of the kind of the nuts and bolts of Questline as I talked about in the last episode. I'm going to dive into the game type editor and give people kind of a preview of how to do things. But I'm really excited to see a bunch of people. And hello, Grim, and hello, Anna. I appreciate you guys are here in the stream. If anybody has any questions while I'm doing this, please feel free to ask, and I will try to answer them as quickly as possible. But as you know, it's funny trying to start a brand new stream and trying to learn the ropes. And I've watched a couple of people do this over the years. My good friend Rage Mage did a lot of streaming, and I used to be very envious of the way that he could just very naturally talk to people. And one of the things that I really want to accomplish is try to build essentially the Questline brand. Get people involved, see how people are trying to interact, and try to really help people get their games online and find a way to do that. So, because I'm terrible at marketing and I probably need a little help, please share this with your friends, ask them to join, have them come join in the live stream, talk to me, talk about your games, all that wonderful stuff just makes it so much better. But please subscribe, follow me on YouTube, follow me on Facebook, come to my Discord channel. All those things are very helpful because the more people I can bring into this, the better I can provide a service to everybody. One of the things that I did learn from the last stream, which was Lord Elfric needs to learn to not to ramble. Thank you, Selbrum, for mentioning that to me, because I found that very funny, because I realized towards the end, I started to ramble quite a bit, and I will try to keep things more succinct in what I'm trying to do. I'm also going to try to say the word a lot less, because that happened a lot. Let's see. Let's try to get some audio going here. Maybe we'll upload some music. One of the things that we didn't really talk about last time was the audio scenes that, we talked about it just very briefly, but the audio scenes inside of Questline are a really powerful tool. And I'm a big fan of being able to have thematic music throughout the thing. And let me see if I can just add some audio. Let's see here. We'll create a new scene. We'll just create some background music. And you can add some groups in a subgroup if you want to kind of put things in there. But then to add sounds, you just quite literally open it up, goes into your asset selector, and then you can come in and hit add asset. And from here, I know you can't see my screen, but let me find some music real quick. Some audio. Let's find maybe some... Nope, not that one. Almost there. Let me see if this will work. All right, so I'm going to grab a bunch of files. And this is going to upload multiples. And you can see it actually uploads multiple assets if I select most things in a folder. Now, one thing you'll probably notice if you're ever using this on a mobile device, if you upload a .ogg file, the OGG files do not work on iOS devices. And that is because Apple is very unpleasant to work with, and they don't support OGG files, even though that they're better for things like games. They're a smaller size typically. So hopefully we won't run into too many problems if people are ever trying to do that. Unfortunately, but you can just upload MP3s and they work just fine. Grim, unfortunately, I don't think these are copyright free, but they are from Michael Gelfi Studios. and they are quite wonderful. It's a really good thought. Maybe I can find something that's a little different. That's a good question. Let's maybe find. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, that might be a non-starter because I don't want to have the audio get cut out because I'm trying to play music in the background. So maybe for the next stream. So you'll just have to listen to me, and we will just not do that. But as easy as you saw me do it, I can very easily add the sounds. I forgot to actually select them, so now I can actually select all the sounds in here and hit select, and you'll see that now I have all these wonderful soundtracks, and that's pretty much it. You can hit play. You can set this up as a playlist if you want to. You can change this to a playlist, and it will just play all these in top to bottom order. You can do that. It's pretty easy, straightforward. All right. So what I was talking about before, in terms of the game type editor and how the whole system works, it really boils down to two major pieces that exist. And I discussed this, like I said before. You have a game type and you have a dice bag. Now, the game type is essentially, here's all the character sheets, here's all like your skills and your, how the kind of the sheet mechanics work, and how does that, kind of give you all the tooling to be able to save all your character data to Questline. Now, the dice bag is the rules that when you open up the dice dialog, it is literally like what dice you see here. Can you use advantage or disadvantage? How the modifiers work, what options you have here, what details you might end up with here, like the D20 action type and the D20 spell. This kind of stuff exists through the dice bag, and we have this tooling in the background that sets all this stuff up for you. So what we're going to be focusing on is essentially the game type. And I can go into the dice bags at some other future stream and kind of get into that and discuss that and how that kind of works and what I have plans for and how I plan on improving that so that people have access to the dice bag editor themselves. Now, what my plan for tonight was, one of the very first game types that was created inside of Questline was the Pathfinder 1 game type. And that was done by our good friend Nacho. And he is on our Discord server. Ars Nacho is his name. And you can thank him for the Pathfinder 1 because he started that, and he did that on his own without me prompting him. And it was pretty amazing to watch somebody use the tool for the first time without me really doing anything. And unfortunately, the Pathfinder 1 obviously has not been used nearly as much as Pathfinder 2 has. And the original tools that were there inside the game type editor were not nearly as robust as they are today. So he gets kind of some of these old tools. And so the original game type has some very old setup, and we have way better ways of doing things these days. And it can improve the overall flow of the entire character sheet. So whenever you are trying to work on a game type, and I'll start off, and I'm in just any game, you go and create a game, whether you choose a specific game type or you pick the basic game type. Once you're in there, you open up your game settings here, and you will find these two buttons here right next to the game type. One is edit game type, and one is create new game type. When you are doing, when you are editing your own game type, you can edit it from here, or you can edit it from the create game menu. When you are searching for a game, you'll see a little icon on the top right-hand corner. I'll even just go show it. Up in the top right-hand corner of any game type that you are the author of, you'll see this edit game type, and it will let you go in there and let you modify it. That's one way to do it. The other one is you go into your game and you will use the game type. I was going to show off the other one. Give me a second. Show off the original. And you will be able to edit the game type or create a new one. And when you're trying to modify or customize your own game type, you just want to go create new game type. And then you can pick the base template. So it'll pick you can pick an existing one if you want. You can also choose the basic game. But Pathfinder 1 is the one that we're going to kind of mimic. And then we'll create the Pathfinder 2 and it will go from there. But I want to show off the existing character sheets, right? So here's an NPC sheet, right? So the NPC sheets, have a number of various pieces. And it was mostly streamlined so that you had pretty much the simple kind of bare necessities to kind of run your game without a lot of extras. And it was an easy way to kind of set that up. And it was the way my friend really wanted to run his games. And it's why, this is what I find the most powerful part about Questline is this tool is that you can literally play the game you want to play the way you want to play it, because you can customize your character sheets and all kinds of stuff on the fly very easily with just a few clicks inside the game type editor. And so my plan today is to move on to the Pathfinder 2. Let me see if I can find the player. Yep. So this is a player sheet and the way it's set up. And so we're going to take this as a basic template and we're going to modify it completely. And we're going to update it to use the new rule set, which there's not a ton of changes between Pathfinder 1 and 2 in terms of like how the character sheet layout is. But it does need to be updated. So let's go to my other game and we will start from there. And there it is, Pathfinder 2. Now, what I did, so whenever I'm starting a new game type and I'm starting to work on things, one of the very first things I do is I go to the character sheet and I kind of look at it just to get an idea of what I'm doing. And what I've done here is I've just taken some screenshots of their PDF and really kind of looked at what they're trying to accomplish with the sheet. And now the Pathfinder sheet is very crunchy. It has got a lot of essentially fields to fill out, lots of, area to do stuff and, really nice layout in terms of like overall look and feel, but there is a lot here. And so how do you manage to get all of this into kind of a streamlined website that is capable of doing, I want to use it on a mobile device and I want to do all these kind of things. And I've tried to build enough tooling that where you can I've built generic tools that let you kind of cover a lot of these pieces without really burdening the player with a lot of extra stuff. If they want to keep some extra notes, there's journals and notes and they can keep their stuff in there. But there's also skills and stuff like what are called a skill component is just kind of like a generic holder for things like you could do everything from feats to like blurbs of text. Like maybe I want to, record my background, my appearance, all that kind of stuff. I can put it inside of a skill block and it lets me kind of fill out the details so that my character sheet contains all that data and I can look at it at any time, but I can also collapse it and make it so that I don't have to look at it all the time. So what I've done is I've taken a screenshot and I've put it on as the map so that I can actually see it. So I don't have to switch back and forth to the sheet inside of a PDF. Obviously, because of streaming purposes, I want to make sure that everybody can see kind of what I'm looking at so we have a decent idea. So the next step is to come into the game type editor, into the game type selector. You find your original game type that you want to copy from, and you can either select it here, or when you hit new game type, you can do the same thing and find it here. So what we're going to do is we're simply just going to say Pathfinder 2. 2E. So from here, we are brought to the basic layout of the game type editor. And the editor is broken down into a couple of different sections, or three different real sections, four. Sorry. The first one obviously is the header, right? This is where you have your save buttons, where you can add components, you can modify your tooltips, you can copy sheets, you can paste them, you can copy an entire game type if you want to. And doing something like this will copy essentially what is known as the JSON, JSON, the object notation of how everything is saved. And you can paste this into a text editor. If you're code savvy, you can muck around with it and do stuff. It is dangerous to do so because you could very easily break something. So you kind of want to know what you're doing before you step in and do that stuff. But then you can also paste a game type. So it's a good way to, hey, Mr. Mean, thank you very much. But you can also paste, the JSON right back into Questline, and it will do that. It's a very easy way for you to kind of like, if you want to kind of get your, fingers in the dirt, as it were, you can do that. You can muck around with it, and then you can paste it, and then it'll maybe save you a little bit of time if that's your comfort zone. Finally, there's this thing called show grid, which will turn on the grid here, and you'll see these kind of dotted lines, and it shows you the kind of grid layout that exists based on your components that you're on your screen. I'll turn that off for now. We can get back into that in more detail later. The left-hand side is your property selector. This is everything from the properties of the game type, right? So like Pathfinder 2E, the publisher is Pazio Publishing. I will update the description, and I will go into, I have a more standard format that I like to use. And anytime that I do this stuff, I've been trying to going forward, trying to mark up that, these are unofficial supports. They're unofficially supported by me, because I don't technically have permission from them to, do anything with it. This is just me trying to provide, these pieces, these character sheets and stuff to players. Maybe someday they will give me their blessing, or they will take over these things and they can control this stuff and they can manage it themselves, which is, that would be the best, because then I wouldn't have to do it all the time. So the main properties of the game type, if you want to do things like you have, the tags. So, this is a fantasy game. This is going to be a group based game, and it's a TTRPG. So what this does is this sets it up so that when players, when users are, when you all are trying to create your games and you go searching, this will filter them out if you use those quick filters. And then the privacy is, if you just want this for yourself, you can keep it private. If not, you can make it public, and then everyone around can actually use this. It just makes it public to everybody to use. But do be careful if you have a public game and you are modifying character sheets, you can break someone else's game. It's it's kind of comes with the territory. You can set the default dice bag for it. So that when players are creating a new game with it, it will automatically pull that dice bag. You can pick a default journal theme. You can pick the default character sheet. Which we'll set a little bit later, and then the default game master sheet. Oftentimes, you'll pick like the NPC sheet for game masters, and then players will be able to have an actual sheet. So when they create a new character, we'll automatically select that sheet. You can also pick the encounter style. So the encounter styles are, high to low and low to high. You roll on dice, the high die wins, and it sorts everything automatically in that order. Low to high is the reverse of that. Manual is you as the game master just drag people in the position that they're supposed to be. People just join the encounter and you just put them in the order you want. There's no, automatic anything there. And then there's the one called claim, which is more along the lines of what I call popcorn initiative, right? So it's when players are like, hey, I want to take my turn. So claim lets, the people individually, raise their hand and take control, and then it gives them access to be able to run their character and that kind of stuff. So these are all options. And then you finally have things like your default map scale options, right? So this is Pathfinder. 5 feet is what the standard square is, so we don't really need to change anything here. Most games will either be like 1 square or 1 meter or something along those lines, and you can set those up so that when you create your new maps, these scale options will be automatically set, and then you'll just be able to run the game, and the calculations will be automatic with that. And then you have, the diagonal calculation type, which is either flat, double every other, or exact. Exact is for things like board games where you want actual, like, specific, like, decimals and, that kind of stuff. Flat is just, it'll just do a flat multiplication of number of squares, or grid, squares as you see them. And then double every other is the old school, like D&D 3.5 and 3.0, where every second diagonal movement that you do counts as an extra movement. So that gets calculated. And then finally, you have your item options. So you can pick a default item type. So like in this case, we probably want the default item type to be 20. And then our encumbrance type is going to be based off of weight. So you can set those up, and it's pretty easy to set that. I'll set this to parchment. And I like to do a lot of saves. It's just a habit over years of, doing software development. I tend to save things because you can't make everything work perfectly all the time. And sometimes there's bugs and sometimes there crashes. So I highly recommend that you just save often and make sure that you do that. Now, the next piece is the conditions. Conditions are a lot. This was a way for players to be able to, or game masters, the ability to set up as many conditions as you want. And there are some things in there which I can go into more detail at a later date, when it talks about adjustments, where I can adjust things like the dice step, where I can adjust the value of something, so that if you have an attribute, and let's say I'm exhausted, my exhaustion, gives me a -2 or something along those lines, right? And this is, disadvantage on ability checks. So I don't even know if that's true for Pathfinder 2e. So that's a whole other level of stuff. Like, you got to kind of dive into the details of this, and you got to set this up. But the cool thing is it's very easy to add conditions on the fly, and you can set this up. Like, I can go to blinded, and it's really easy for me to go pick from our library of icons, and I can pick blind here, and I can save that. And now this will show up so that when you set the condition on the token, that token will have this little blind icon on it, and you can actually mouse over it. It will give you these details. It'll give you actually the short description when you're on the battle map, and then when you mouse over the item inside of the little mini character sheet in the bottom left-hand side of the map, or the battle map that you're on, it will give you the full description so you can see in more detail. And you can also set like max number of ranks. So like exhaustion is a great example. Exhaustion, this has, if we follow the text in here, there's 6 ranks. So I can mark 6 ranks. I will, maybe I'll even set the exhaustion to be this one, and then I'll save it. And so when we see this, we can actually look at this, and you can actually mark the number of ranks inside of the inside the condition on the character sheet. Next is currencies. So a lot of things with the inventory, you want to deal with currency, and you want to be able to record that pretty easily. So it's pretty easy for you to just say, I'm going to add a currency. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say copper, right? CP is the symbol, multiplier is 1 because that's the base value. And then maybe we'll do silver, SP, and this is going to be a 10. Do the same thing. Uh-oh, I broke something. It's okay. It'll be just fine. I can come in here and then I can say gold. And then we will set this to 100. And then we will say platinum. I don't even know if this is accurate for Pathfinder. I haven't played Pathfinder in years, so I don't remember exactly what it is. And that'll be 1,000. Now, you don't have to set up the multipliers. They don't really do anything yet. My intention is that when you're trading, and when I have plans to build kind of a trading terminal so that you can trade between players and that kind of stuff. And you'll actually be able to, I want to set up kind of an exchange system so that if I want to give, 200 copper to somebody, but I only have silver, I should be able to do that. And the exchange system will use this multiplier so that it'll kind of automatically do the math for you. So I'm trying to set stuff up for the future whenever I eventually get to that. Yeah, Anna, the multipliers from the base currency. So essentially, it's copper is 1. And you can honestly do it in reverse too. Like you could say platinum is 1, and then copper would be like 0.0001 if you wanted to do it that way. It really comes down to how you want to do it. But the reality is that whenever the math is going to be done behind the scenes, when that tool is eventually built, it will do a multiplier and it will say, I'm going to do this times this, and it gets me my end result. And then finally, here under the game type options is the damage types, right? I don't think I really need to change anything here. I think this is pretty much the same between Pathfinder and D&D. I'd love to add images to this at some point so that you can actually see the images instead of just text. But it's pretty much straightforward. You can add a damage type, and then this shows up inside of your dice bags so that when you pick a damage type for an effect, that will actually display, any one of these damage types from the selection list. Now, let's go into the. So, like I said, this is the basic properties of a game type. Now, here on this side, and you've seen me editing stuff inside of here. This is the properties of the given selected options, right? So, if I pick the sheet, I can select the skilled NPC sheet, and it will give me the properties for the skilled NPC sheet. And then I can also pick the individual components on the sheet, which you'll see over here on the right. And then you'll also see this tooltip, which is the little mini tooltip that you see down on the battle map. And this is so when you're setting up a sheet, I'll answer that question in a second, Anna. When you set up a sheet, you really want to kind of set up these tooltips as well, because they give you a really great way to kind of do like a stat block, right? And my intention was always to make it so that the game master has these little quick tools that make it easier for them to be able to run their game. And this little tooltip window is exactly that. This is a quick way for me to be able to come in here. Like I'll actually exit out of this. I don't have a good example here. Let me go to a different game. So I'll go to my D&D game because it has a really good example. And, oh, that was the wrong one. That was the basic game. So here, when I select my token, down in the bottom right, you will see all of these little bits here. And this is the tooltip. And this makes it so that as a game master, if I have NPCs down here, I don't have to open up the sheet. I don't have to double click on this. I don't have to go to here. I don't have to scroll down. I can just find what I'm looking for. I can say, you know what, here, I'm going to roll an insight check. Bam. That was easy. Like, it makes it quicker for me as a game master to run my game. It also makes it easier for the players too. But you spend less time trying to search for things in your character sheet, because more often than not, you want to roll something pretty quickly and you want to move on from that rather than, finding something deep in your character sheet. Now, let me go back to Pathfinder 2e. So inside of the editor, like we just talked about, selecting the sheet itself, you'll see that it highlights here on the left, which sheet I have selected, which component I have selected. And you'll even see this little thing where if you mouse over, you'll see this all over the place. If you see these little eyes and you hover over them, they will give you details on what it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to work, or maybe a little trick that offers you some insight on, what you can do to make this better and how it works. So I try to do this all over the place for things that would make better sense. And in this case, this right here, this condition says unidentified ID, right? And this is kind of an old bug that existed in the game type editor way back in the day, and it has since been fixed. But these kind of things pop up if you have like something that has duplicate names, like this right here. See how it shows, duplicate field name? It will warn you that you have duplicate field names for two components. And the reason for that is, and I'll explain that in a very, what's the right way to put this, with the field type, the root field name on any sheet, on any property for any component, is the most important part of that component. This is how the database knows where to save this data, right? So when you make this name, you really shouldn't want to change it. If you make a mistake, it's more often better to leave it alone than to go changing it. And the reason for that is because when the data saves in the character sheet behind the scenes in the database, it uses this value to actually give the actual property name of what you're trying to do. So a good example is a user had actually asked about this the other day. They were having a problem where their characters' inventories disappeared. And it's because they came in and they changed the root field name to something else. And so when the character sheet loaded and it went to find the root field name, that data was still technically in the sheet underneath the covers, but it could no longer find it because the name changed. So it's really important when you set this value that you really set it and you kind of forget it after that. Like, pick a good name, leave it what it is, and move on from that. But it will warn you, and the reason why the duplicate field name is so important is that if you have two of the same, they will overwrite each other. They don't know the difference between them. And I do this for a very specific reason. I give you all control of this name because it's more intuitive for you to look at the sheet and see that this is the bio or conditions or hit points or some field value that makes sense to you than it is for me to just assign it some random value. Because if I ever have to debug a sheet and I want to figure it out, the last thing I want to do is map some random set of characters to some root field name and some, name for a component that just, I hate doing that myself. So I set this up so that if I'm ever looking into something, it makes it easier for me to debug stuff and find stuff. So I give you guys a lot of control, but you can also get yourself in trouble. So you got to be careful with how these work. So that's what the root field name is. It is the most important property in all of the components. Make sure that you make them unique and make sure that you don't have duplicates. Make sure that you don't really change them unless you really want to change them. And oftentimes, if I'm making a revision to a character sheet and I want like something because I decided I found a better way to do stuff, I will actually do, and I'll show an example of this. I will make a duplicate of that character sheet and call it version 2. And then what that does is it lets players choose that as inside of the settings of the character. They can go and change the character sheet type, and then they can actually choose version 2, and they may lose some things, but most of the other data will stay. And so it gives them the ability to switch over to a new character sheet, or if they want to, they can actually go in and take the character sheet and they can create a brand new character, and then they can, copy and paste data over as they want to. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, in this game type, we have 3 different sheets here, right? There's the skilled NPC, a simple NPC, and a sheet, a regular Pathfinder sheet. Now, this is where, making something like a simple sheet makes it a lot easier to be able to find stuff. And there was a lot less tooling back in the day, so the tooltips weren't as advanced, they weren't as easy to read. So making like a simple NPC sheet is less useful today than it was, back then. So I'm showing you kind of an example of like, multiple different worlds that existed and ways that people were solving problems, with, having bare bones understanding of these tools. Now, mind you, I might gloss over things, and I apologize for that. I've been obviously working on this for so long that I have details and knowledge about the systems that I intrinsically do and I don't even think about. So if I say something or something goes over your head because I'm just simply, talking at 400 miles an hour, please ask, because I will be happy to answer the questions, and it will help me kind of pull me back into kind of a grounded space so that I can make sure that I'm giving you guys good information. The game type editor in general is going to be a fire hose of information. So that's why I think this like live stream and the things that I'm doing are going to be very useful, because it's going to, people can review this and go back over it if they need to, and it might help, kind of bridge that gap a little bit. All right. So we're going to go ahead and save this. So we have a couple of sheets, right? So the simple NPC sheet, I probably don't need this. I'm just going to delete it. You just go right up to the top of the delete. I'll do that again. You select the sheet itself, you go to delete, and poof, it's gone. Problem solved. Now, the main thing that we really want to work on is, and you can actually drag these around too, so I can resize the sheet so that I can see more of what I'm working on. This, when you minimize this, when you scroll this, when you drag this all the way to the left, this is the minimum size sheet that you really kind of want to aim for, because this is what essentially is going to be the best of a mobile view. If you care about mobile stuff at all, like you want people to be able to view this on their phone or whatever, minimizing the sheet to this view right here is the best way for you to be able to determine, what's going to look best on somebody's phone. I do have plans that when you expand this, that you'll actually be able to set different sheet styles. So, or not styles, not the right word for it, different layouts. That's the word I'm looking for. So I'm going to have this so you have essentially a small sheet, a medium sheet, and a large sheet, and how each one will let you change the layout so that you can actually adjust. And so that if a player drags open their window, you can actually make something that's bigger for people who like big sheets and have that on their desktop all the time. So that's a planned feature. So let's talk about, let me see here. I'm going to save this again. I just do that out of habit. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with the basics. Every sheet, you're going to want a bio, right? This is the most basic kind of like piece that you care about for a character sheet. This is, the character's name, what basic structure do they have, and how you want to kind of like set all these things up. Now, I have two different bio components, right? And when I click this add component here, you'll see I have all these different components here. And there's some specific ones down below that are for D20 that I had originally started Questline with. And the basic components actually cover a lot of this functionality inside them these days. And so you don't really need to use the D20 stuff anymore because they are less relevant, because the new tooling handles all these cases. And at some point I want to deprecate all of these so that people don't use them anymore. Because these, I'm hoping, will cover everything you need. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete this bio component here. And because I'm going to try to show off how we can, with Pathfinder being a D20 system, how you can kind of get away from the original D20 kind of tooling. So we'll delete the D20 bio component, and it's gone. And then I'm just going to come up to here and I'm going to do basic bio. And you can set the row. You can just manually set it. I'll set it back to 1. And I'm going to set the width to 4. And that gets into a whole other piece. When you're setting up your sheet is broken down into columns, right? And you see this thing where it says grid columns 6. So if you want to have the standard Questline style sheet where it's mobile friendly, you want to set this to a 4. And the reason for that is because when you are placing components on the page, you want the very last column. And I explain this here in this little width. Setting the value to the max width +1 of the sheet will stretch the component to the full width of the sheet. See the grid columns property on the sheet. For example, if your grid columns is equal to 3 and you set the width to 4, it will always stretch the component with the size of the sheet. So the reason I do that, and it doesn't really show up here because I actually have things that are outside of the area. And so what I really want to do is I want to fix this. So we're gonna get rid of the conditions. Don't need that for the moment. I'm gonna increase the skills. I'm gonna move them down. I'm gonna increase this, move that down, and I'm gonna change the column to go down this way. And I'm gonna go. Oh, and that's the other thing, the height. A lot of components, you only need to set the height to 1. Pretty rarely do you need to set them beyond 1. And so we're going to go to actions. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to set the height to this. The width is 4. I'm going to move this down. You'll see when I move it over here, column 1, row 11. That's row 10. Okay, that's working so far. We are on row 9. This is row 4. So we're going to set our speed to row 5 or 6. Change that. And you'll see how the width changes and everything. Then I'll change my initiative. And then we're going to set the column to 3, row 6. And then we have a width of 4. I'm going to save this again. And what we're probably seeing here is the fact that the grid columns, I don't know if it's updated yet. So if we simply refresh our page here, and go back to the Pathfinder sheet. So we're still not getting any stretching, which is something I'm going to try to address here. We have the bio, the hit points, the armor class. I want to see if any of these items are outside of the range. Width of 3, skills 2, width of 3, actions. All right. Let me see if width of 4. Skills 2, width of 4. So we have something broken here. You know what? Let's try something a little different here. And this is because this is a very old game type. We might be running into an old problem that we don't really know anything about. So let's create a brand new sheet. Oh, I'm sorry. I set the grid columns wrong. It should be a 3. Yeah, you're exactly right, Grim. The default is 3, not 4. My brain was not thinking about that. So what I said before, you want to set this to be a 3 inside the grid. Now you'll see that it stretches. And so when I resize, it stretches to the width and you have no problems there. So the way this works with setting this up is that now we have the ability so that if a player, is using this on their mobile device and their phone just happens to be a little bit wider than everybody else's, this will automatically resize, and this actually looks really nice in the long run. This gives a lot of power to you to be able to set this up. And again, when I eventually add that system of being able to set up different layouts based on the size of this, it will actually resize automatically. It's called responsive design. And so I want to kind of build that in, bake that whole kind of concept inside of this so that if somebody resizes it, it will move components around the screen so that, you can make better use of wider screens and stuff like that if people are using non-mobile devices. or even if they're just like in a landscape mode or something like that. It gives them, makes better use of their space. So, so let's talk about armor class. This D20 armor class component completely defunct these days. Don't need it. We'll replace it completely. We know that if I save this, I'm going to go back to my page here, right? And I'm going to take a look at some of these things, right? So we have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Those are the basic 6 attributes that belong in most D20 games. Now there's this thing called partial boost. I'm not sure what that does. And we'll have to figure that out based off of... we can pull up the rule book, or if somebody in chat knows what it is offhand, we can adjust that and we can account for that. In D&D 5th edition, you can add your proficiency. If you're proficient in an attribute, you can actually use that. You can use a saving throw with proficiency, and that's an easy way to do it. But we're going to kind of go back. We're going to look at these basic pieces here, right? Character name, the ancestry, the background, the class, right? And then level and experience, and then hero points. Hero points is something we can get to after the fact, but we're going to aim for doing the bio, which is this up here, and we're going to add that. We're going to work on the attributes. So we'll go back into here, go to the sheet. I'm going to rename this to be player. I tend to call the sheets player and NPC, or player and something else. I find that player looks nicer. It's easier for players to find, because that's mostly what we're aiming for. Game masters, you have a little bit stronger learning curve, but players really should have the minimal things to make their life as easy as possible. That should always be the goal. Because every minute you spend as a game master trying to help them with the tool is minutes taking away from your game that you could be playing the game and running the game. So always try to make it a little easier for your players. So we have, let me see here. So we were talking about the bio, right? So inside of the basic bio component, you have a number of options. Well, we're going to, I guess we'll take 1/2 step back. The new theming system in the character sheets is the brand new stuff that I'm working on, and will hopefully be out pretty soon. I'm almost done with it. But you'll see here, as I'm working on this, we're going to kind of use the new themes, because it's important to kind of show it off now, because it will reflect what it's going to be when it gets released. It's pretty close to done. I don't think I'm going to be adding or removing too many things at this point. But when you come to your sheet, you can set up a base theme for your sheet. You can set up a background style. Right now we have a fantasy and sci-fi. And when I do that, you'll see that it doesn't update immediately, but as soon as you pick one of the components, it will update. That's just kind of a small development bug. When I get to it, it'll be much more real time when you do it. And then you want to set kind of your default border styles. And the border styles, you have, sci-fi and fantasy for now. I definitely plan on adding tons more of these so that you can kind of theme your sheets and do all kinds of stuff. Fantasy plain is what I will set mine up with. Again, you change and you'll see that I get these really cool looking, new borders for my sheets. And then I can come in here. I can also set my fonts for my characters for this sheet specifically. What we'll do is we will probably pick something like Arcane Fable as our normal. I like to set this at 1.3. And obviously this comes down to your preferences, but these are kind of how I've been setting it up. I will set Balthazar as my second one and Balthazar as my third one, but I will make the secondary and tertiary fonts slightly different in size. Now, the way these work is that it will adjust various, headings and titles and all kinds of stuff so that you can kind of manipulate this pretty easily. And, just out of the gate, you can already see how much kind of cooler this already looks with just some very basic changes. Now, let's go to the bio. In the bio, we're going to come to here. We're actually going to change some of our properties here. So we're going to change that to say 16. We're going to change the padding over here to say 16. We're going to change the top to say 16 and the bottom to say 16. so that we kind of spread this out a little bit and our bio looks a little cleaner, a little easier to use. Again, this comes down to preference, right? This is why I put these properties in here, so that it comes down to your preference as a designer. Like, what do you want to kind of set this up as, and how do you want to do it? Because some themes may have certain things that you prefer and maybe look a little different. You can also set a background. Like, I can be like, I'm going to set, a background on this. I'm going to have a bunch of different backgrounds available. You can change the opacity, so it kind of, reduces it. You can change this to pretty much whatever you want. We won't do anything for now. Now, down below in the basic bio, you have this thing called custom fields. You can also set subname text. So this, if we were to think about the character sheet in general, we have a character name and the player name. And if you want to do that, you could put the player name in there. But I tend to do things like ancestry, background, and class, right? Most of the time people can just type those things in. You don't need to make it some drop down where people have to pick from specific ones. Let people type a couple of things out. It'll save you a million moments of time, because the free formness of it just lets people, because then there's less mucking about that you have to do, that I now have to modify this. Like, most of this is just data entry, and it's kind of the keep it simple, stupid policy that I have. I prefer people to just, put in a couple of things rather than make them pick from a list, and then you have to maintain that list. Those kind of things add up so much to wasted energy. And so I think what I'll just do is say ancestry, background, and class as that item right here. Yeah, exactly, Grim. Like, if you're adding, Grim said, especially if you add an expansion or something, like if you have games that add-ons with tons of different, modules and books and, extras, that is so hard to maintain for players or for, people who run these systems, all in the sake of automation, right? Like, you want to automate it. You want people just pick from a list. Just type 5 letters out. I'm a ranger. That's 6 letters. That's not hard. Like, it's trying to give, again, that agency should belong to the players. Like, let them, pick whatever they want. It just, again, it's a simple thing, but that kind of agency just means so much. And I just think that a lot of this is, I tried to look at Questline as a very simple, like, if I had a paper character sheet in front of me and I just wanted to write whatever I wanted on it, can I do the same thing in Questline? That's kind of the goal I'm really hoping to keep, because I think it's more important to let people have that free form than it is to, like, automate everything away and make it difficult for them to be able to do what they want. All right, so we're down to here. So here you can use this subname text, and you can actually change this. This is a really easy way to do this. So it was ancestry, background, and class, right? So just by doing this, right here, when I change that, now players immediately have this idea. We're going to create a new character so we can see this. We're going to use our Elfric character. We're going to change our player to the player sheet. And then here, when I'm under Elfric and I hit edit, it actually says right here, ancestry, background, and class now. So it's very easy for my brain to, like, oh, that's where I put my stuff. So, I'm a elf ranger, right? And I forget what the backgrounds are. Noble. So, bam. Like, to me, that's really easy, and it keeps it exceptionally flexible for people. Like you said, Anna, it's really simple for people to forget that just typing in a couple of things makes it look just fine, and you get all the details and all the information you actually need to know. So that kind of stuff is really important to kind of keep flexible. Now, the next thing to really think about is things like heritage and traits and size and background notes and class notes. class notes we can kind of put down in a different sections under like features, background notes, the same thing. Heritage and traits and size. Maybe that's something that we actually want to put in here. So let's go back to the sheet. We'll go back to the bio. And then here we actually have this thing called custom fields. I can add a custom field and I can just say size. Again, it gives people the ability to set, whatever value they want, right? And we're going to say, I'm just going to call details as a category, visibility type, and we can put that as a panel. And then you can also do this thing called left align panels. And so size will show up right under here. And I forget what the other field was. So we'll go back real quick. It was heritage and traits. So here, we'll go back to that, click on that. And then we're going to go heritage and traits. Details. And then, so you have two different visibility types, right? One's called panel and one is called detail. And the detail will actually show up underneath your portrait, and it'll be more of a long form text. So you can fill out, quite a, immunities and vulnerabilities, that kind of stuff, where you might have much longer text, where size is, it's one word. And then maybe we might want to add our level here too. So we will do level details, and we're going to make this a panel as well. And so now you'll see size and level right here. And so from here, we now have, I'm actually going to drag this onto the sheet so it makes it a little easier for us to look at. Now I have the ability to edit this, and you can see it shows up under details, medium, heritage and traits, whatever, level 1. And then if you fill out a background, you'll see that it shows up here too as well. So now, just with those couple of things, I've set up the ability to kind of have my basic piece right here. And you could even go so far as to say, I want to, track my experience here too, if you really want to. But some people might want some sort of tooling that, they can add and subtract experience. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So we'll worry about experience kind of after the fact. So the next, before we go in there, so the next thing that we want to look at is attributes, right? Now, this is one of the cases where I would say you want to keep, for when you're using a D20 system, the D20 attributes component here is actually a pretty useful tool because it's an all-in-one package and it makes it easy for you to manipulate this. You can technically do this in the basic attributes component, but there's quite a bit more setup, and it requires you to kind of finagle some things. And it makes it less compatible with some of the tooling inside of the D20 dice bag. So that's why I would recommend you use this. I'd love to at some day migrate this out, and then everybody would just be using the basic one, but that's what it is. All right. So I've added new tooling that exists in my development build that will be released soon. And the way it's set up now is, bye, Anna. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you stepping in. Hopefully you'll be able to catch the rest of this, maybe while you're flying. That'll be pretty great. So when we talk about like the different styles, we can talk about, let me see, I was talking about the panels. So the basic setup right here is these panels, right? So each attribute ability score has its own panel. And I just recently added this new one called row. So this actually makes it much more compact. It's a little better, I think, for the long term if you are playing. Where did that go? My hit points. I need to. Oh, it's because the height of this is set to 2. All right, so I'll move that back down and set that to row there. So now you actually have a pretty decent way to set this up. And I'll change this so I can kind of resize this. And then I now have, my basic attributes. And you can change the attributes here too. Like the way this works is that each of these, they're completely configurable. You have 6 slots essentially, and you can kind of adjust them how you want. And then we can also do something like with proficiency. And this with proficiency is set up so that if you're using the proficiency component, you can set this up so you can mark these as stars. And that kind of gets into the rules of whether or not that's what the intention of this partial boost is, right? If the partial boost is intended to be similar to how proficiency works, then this would work for us, but it might not be. And we might have to kind of manipulate this in another way. Now, we'll start with this. There's also this with primary and secondary, which was something I was trying to do for Castles and Crusaders. But that's, it's something down the line. Maybe one day I'll get to it. So for now, we will just leave it like this, and we will come back to that. If we have to, we can come back and rebuild an attribute component using the basic attribute component, which will give us a lot more flexibility to maybe do things that it's asking us to do in Pathfinder. So we'll start with this, and we'll move on to down to here. So we've gotten through creating this, and I've given a lot of kind of backstory on the game type editor and how the things work, and you're seeing me kind of work through this. And once you kind of get the hang of some of these things, you'll start to see how quickly you can start to modify a lot of this, and it is pretty powerful for what you want to do. There's a lot of functionality that you can really use to your advantage. Okay, so let's move on to the next piece here. So hit points, obviously, that's it's the most common thing that people are going to run into. So resistances and immunities and conditions, right? So on top of their maximum hit points, their current hit points, their temporary hit points, they're dying. They have 4 pips here, and whether they're wounded or not. So wounded could be another thing that we can kind of look into. But the hit point component actually does pretty much all of these things except the wounded marker. So the hit point component, I like to use this, change this to the fantasy ivy, which actually kind of makes this stand out a little bit more. And then we can come here and we can take the view type. You have 3 different types. You have inline, current, and pips. Pips is for games that, maybe you have 5 hit points and you show them in little pips. It's very easy to track, very easy to click on. You can manipulate them very quickly and very easily. Inline shows you a min-max value, or your current value and your max value side by side. And current just shows you your current value. But when you have current, you can also pick where is it? The show max, right? Grim asks, is there a reason you don't have an item sheet? So you mean like a different character sheet that's just for items, Grim? So I was talking about the max here. And so you can simply turn on the max. So this is what I often do because I find this is a little easier to read. You can have a max value set here, and then you can also do temp, and you can do them right here, and it makes it pretty easy to kind of toggle these as you need to. And it's very easy to kind of manipulate these for the players. Let me see here. We want to set the max position. I haven't taken the time to modify the temp position so that you could change the position. So what I want to do here is if I were to change the max position to the right, It looks like that, but then it looks a little weird because the temp is still there. So we're going to keep it on the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the tracker type with death saves. And what this does is the tracker position. We'll set it to bottom. The render order has to do with the way your token works. When your token is on the battle map, this render order is the order in which the individual little like health bars that show up above the token, in which order they render. So the most basic one I always try to set to 0. And then the other thing that is important that this is you mark the basic item as the is primary. So hit points obviously are like typically the most important thing that you pay attention to when you're running your Pathfinder game. In terms of like statistics. So marking it as is primary is the best thing to do, and then using this show dead icon. The dead icon will show up here, and then the player or whoever's using this can click on this, and it will show a giant red skull over that token when they're dead. Grim. So with items, so I've done this in a couple of games. The inventory I typically put at the very bottom of a character sheet, and I can even do it right now to kind of give an example. Let's save this real quick. I'll typically like some of the basic things that I add to a character sheet are like the basic attributes, the basic actions, the basic bio, the conditions, and the basic inventory. Right. Those are like the 4 major components that pretty much every character sheet is probably going to need, right, in some way. So when you add the basic inventory, you can really just kind of come down here and set the row to like 20 to keep it out of the way for now. But it's right there. Like that's the inventory that a character has. And then if you need something, I like to do this as well. I'll actually create a new character sheet, and I like to call it the group inventory sheet. And what this does is this is a great way for you to be able to take that inventory and then you put a basic inventory on it, and that's it. That's the whole sheet. And then you can just put that as a character sheet that everyone has access to in your game. Just make it a public sheet, and then everybody can just see the group inventory. And it's an easy way for somebody to drop stuff into. You can even change your active character. Here, I'll show an example here. So then I create a new character called group inventory and set it to group inventory, hit save. And as you can see, the group inventory has, the item list right here. And from here, if you're ever using this like the treasure tool as a game master, one of the players can actually come in here, change their active character to the group inventory, and try to claim the items, and it can just go straight into the group inventory. And it's an easy way for people to kind of do that. So hopefully that answers your question. All right. So we were talking about the hit points. And so hit points being one of the most, common things that exist on a character sheet. And I don't mean just hit points. This hit point component in names actually really should have been called the pool component. It can be anything. It can be mana. It can be action points. It can be health. It can be, hope. It can be any number of different systems that you want to just track a value that goes up and down. That's what it's for. It's meant to kind of give you a lot of broad options to be able to do that. Not only that, but they show up as little pips or as a health bar or something like that above your character token when you want them to. So even on the battle map, it makes it easy to track those pieces of information. And so with this, I was saying, let's see here. I was talking about the tracker type, right? Death saves. And in here, I set the tracker position to bottom, and you scroll down a little bit and you'll see this death saves group. And I can say, I'm going to have 4 failures. I'm not going to have any successes. It'll be death failures and tracker max rows. I'm going to set it to 1 because I only want to track 1 row. And then I can set the height and the width of what that is. And I'll show the border around that. So now I pretty much have everything I need to track my hit points from this kind of setup. The only thing I don't have is wounded, and I could even put resistances and immunities in some sort of freeform text. I can keep it somewhere else. I could also put it up in the bio if I really wanted to. There's a couple of options there. And then conditions, that's actually an entire component on its own. So the other thing, like I said, one of the basic components that you pretty much want to add is conditions. And so I will add conditions, and I try to keep the conditions actually pretty high up on the list. So if I bring this up, I will bring it up to 6, 7. So we'll keep it here, underneath, things like speed and initiative. And what this will do is this allows us to track any conditions that players have. And you can even do custom conditions. We kind of talked about it when we were doing the character sheets before. I can add a condition, and you can see, like, here's my blinded, and I have my blinded condition here. Now when I zoom in on my map, you can see I have the little blinded icon, and I can mouse over and it will tell me I'm blinded. I can also add like the exhaustion. You can see I have the little pips here, so I can track how many pips there are, and my exhaustion shows up there. I can remove them. I can also add custom. This is a great thing for players. They can add their own custom conditions. I can just say like on fire, and I can, set an icon, burning, save. And now I can just, as a player, I can be like, I'm on fire. And that little thing can help remind me what's going on. And then if I come into here, I can edit it. I can also remove it from here, and it's gone. So that takes care of our conditions. So the only real thing is the resistances and immunities on where we want to put that. And I tend to think that these kind of things are notes that go on a player character sheet. Yeah, and this is, resistances and immunities right here is helpful right next to the hit points because you can kind of remember it. So you could, put something close by if you really wanted to, but I tend to think that most players remember this stuff pretty easily. And it's not something you need to worry about too much. All right. So the next thing that, and we'll add this somewhere down the line, but we don't need to worry about it right now. So the next thing is defenses, right? So an armor class, the shield, and then they have something for hardness, max hit points, BT. I'm not sure what that means yet. Hit points in regards to the armor, probably. And then they have a whole list of like armor proficiencies. And this is, what level of proficiency do I have with, unarmored, light, medium, heavy, whatever. And then, all the pieces that are there. And so what I think this really boils down to is we want to track an armor class. We want to track a plus value for shield, like if we're going to get a bonus from our shield. And then maybe things like hardness, max HP, BT, and HP. And then we can kind of keep track of this as a separate piece. Maybe we create a secondary hit point component that is for armor. That would be this would be something I would actually look up in the rule book and go, okay, what are they trying to say here? And I would figure this out, and I would try to say, okay, if they're trying to track this like regular hit points, what do we need to do with that? And so maybe their armor has individual hit points that they have to track. So let's see here. We're going to go back to the editor, and we will go to here. And so from here, I will go and create, and I like to use the attributes components when I'm doing stuff like this, because this makes it easier for me to kind of use these things to do calculations with. So I'll create a new basic attributes component. I'm going to move it. We're going to set it to 7 for now. I feel like I'm going to sneeze. It's the worst. Don't sneeze on stream. Um, and so what we're going to do is we're going to call this armor, right? Farmer. That's not what I meant. We're going to reduce the size. We're going to make it smaller. And we're going to put it maybe... I have to think about this for a second. There's some cool things you can do with some of the other components. Maybe I don't want to do it this way. Maybe I want to try something a little different. We're going to delete that. We're going to come back and we're going to create a basic value component. The basic value component is essentially the same thing that what the D20 armor class component used to be, with a lot more bells and whistles. So we're going to change that back to 7. We're actually going to change our initiative to go to the very left here. We're going to change our speed. Speed is something that everybody needs. We're going to change that, and then we're going to get our armor class. We're going to armor class. We're going to move that. We're going to move that all the way to the right. And so now we can come in here and we can actually do, not the pattern. We're going to set the type as numeric. And the title is going to be armor. And we'll put the subtitle as class. So now we have this, armor class up and above. And the default value is not -4. Default value is probably 10. And they don't need an allow role. The panel style, this is where the value component can come in real handy. Like I can actually pick kind of a neat little icon, essentially, like visual aid to give people what they're looking to show this off. So I'm going to do 70 by 70 in terms of size. And now you can see I actually have this really cool shield icon. And I plan on adding more of these as well, these kind of neat little panels to add various different ones. You can have like a pointed hex. There's all kinds of ones that exist right now, but the shield one is great for armor class. And then we can do allow sub value, right? And sub value is a way for you to put in something like this, so that I'm going to change the font size here. Oh, why is my font size not working? I broke something. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out later. Min value. There's a... Where'd it go? Is it not? Oh, I don't have it on this one. Okay. Value suffix. Oh, because I probably need to do this. It's still not coming out right. I thought I used to have a property. Yeah. What I'm looking for, and I know I'm kind of rambling on here, what I'm looking for is some of my properties have a minimum height on some. Oh, it must be the pip component that I was working on earlier today. The pip component has a minimum height, and I will probably have to do something similar to this so that you can set the minimum height to this. But so what we can do is we can actually change this. We can just say AC here and get rid of the subtitle. And that's what I want to do. Change the height so that it's a little better. I think maybe do something like that. Well, I'll have to come in and modify this so that it's a little better. The tooling is a little better. Yeah, see, I don't even like that. It makes it so big. This is the only problem with some of the theming that I've done, is that I think I've broken some of these pieces. Oh, you know what? That's probably what it is. I have my primary value. No? Why is it not updating at all? I really did break it. Okay. We'll come back to it later. But you'll see what the way this works. Again, this becomes kind of a free form system. Now we have an armor class, right, and a shield, and I can actually just come in and modify this, right? So I can just say, oops, wrong key. Now I can just say +1, right? And that's really small. It's okay. We might be able to fix that. So here, the tertiary size, maybe we'll do that, and hopefully that will correct that. I think I really did break the value component. That's why I'm kind of doing this, though, because it really does help me see some of these bugs as I'm working through them, as I try to work on this new theming system. But so you can just do this, and I can say, +1, and I can just say shield, right? And lets people kind of manage and maintain that on their own. Again, keep it simple, stupid. Just a simple field that lets them modify the value and the whatever to kind of change this, and it gives people a really good sense of, I have a 10 AC and I have a shield, and that's pretty easy for me to track. Now, if you wanted to get into something more advanced, where you wanted to use like this, where you have a base of 10, you plus your dexterity, based on your dexterity, you could have a dexterity cap, your proficiency, and an item, right? So you might want to include all these bonuses, but oftentimes that can itself be kind of messy, and really just giving people a free-form system is usually the easiest way, because then you could just say, you know what, your dex is 15, right? And I have a +2, so I know that I have a 12. It's dead simple for people to do that. Now, it doesn't automate that for them, which can be nice. And if you want to automate it, you can set up, like I was kind of going with originally, where you actually use an attribute, and you can set up the attribute so you could track not only the shield bonus, you can track the base value of 10, any bonuses that they might have to their armor class based on an item. So like, I'm curious if I could quickly find a game that does that. Maybe Dragonbane. Did I do that? I put some more automation in there. Yeah, armor here, helmet. No, not that one. Maybe Age. Where'd it go? Fantasy Age. Did I do it with Fantasy Age? Yeah. So like here, I have an armor attribute. And so I have a rating and a penalty and a dexterity and, and a defense, right, with my shield. And it lets me kind of modify these on the fly, and it kind of keeps track of them independently. And you can do this, and then you can actually use this when you're creating actions. I can actually do like a modifier, and I can actually come in here and even say something like, I want to include my negative dex, right? So this kind of stuff is a way for you to manipulate the system to get it to kind of do these kind of auto calculations and do these kind of things. So it can be really useful, and maybe we'll do that when we come back to the Pathfinder. I'll have to do some reading on the Pathfinder rules to see if I can kind of come up with this. I plan on, stopping here pretty soon. And as you can see, I've gone through a lot of details, a lot of this stuff, and I want to do this kind of as a series of, let's work on the Pathfinder 2 game system, and kind of I will exclusively kind of build it out with everybody being able to see everything from start to finish. And, minus some of the data entry, which I'll show a couple of examples of you like inputting some data, and then you just rinse and repeat however many times you want to do that with skills and talents and whatever you want to do. And that makes it relatively straightforward. All right, let's go back to the Pathfinder game. So we set up our armor class, right? So now we have an armor class. We can modify this manually. We can kind of set this up. We already have a speed. which is something that is easy for us to manage. You have these 4 different blocks: climbing, flying, and swimming, and walking. And all you have to do is you just toggle between them to change the value. So if I have a swimming speed of 15 feet, it's easy. And then it just kind of highlights that I have something with that rounded circle. And it's easy for me to track as well. Now, let's go. Oh, I wanted to look at the character sheet real quick. Sorry. So the next piece is something like your fortitude, your reflex, and your will, right? So this is based off your constitution, your dex, and your wisdom. And this is going to be a secondary set of attributes. And we want to base those attributes on existing attributes based on the bonuses that we have from things like charisma and strength and whatever. Obviously, constitution, dex, and wisdom. And it makes me really curious if the attributes in Pathfinder 2E are actually just bonus values instead of actual numbers. Anybody know offhand? I don't know if they changed that, because it doesn't look like I would have, that they would just expect to say like +2 here instead of originally like I'd have an 18 strength. So maybe that's what they're intending. And I'm curious, maybe I can find an example character sheet. That's probably what I should have done. Is found an example character sheet. That would have told me so much more. But we'll do that in the next stream. Maybe I will set that up so that we can look at that. So to cover kind of like basically what we've started with, right? We've started with a basic bio, customizing the basic bio. We've talked about using the D20 SRD ability scores component and setting that up. We may want to change this. Instead of letting this be these values, we may actually want to go to a newer attribute system, because if it's using the bonuses of just +2, +1, we might not need, this stuff, and it might change everything. But then we talked about the hit points component and some of the details in there, and a lot of the tooling that's built in here. You can even set things like the color options. I didn't even go into some of those details. You can even have sub values. Sub values are if I have a hit point system where 5 different sub hit points create a total for me, you can do that as well. So there's a lot of extras in here. And then down to the bottom here, the calc button tooltips. This is, these buttons here, the plus and minus buttons, will have these as tooltips for players if you want to, adjust them accordingly. The color options are what shows up in your progress bars above your character, or, what the numbers are when the floating numbers pop up and stuff like that. We talked about that in the last stream. You can kind of customize those colors. But we've added the hit points component. The initiative component we haven't touched. This is the old D20 initiative component. We're going to remove this and replace it with the new way that I set it up, was actually just using a attribute component, the basic attributes component. You can set it up to actually roll initiative for you and that kind of stuff. And so it's a little bit more robust. We talked about this. We kind of glossed over this D20 speed component. Now this is kind of out of the box. It actually has, it's pretty much hard coded in terms of like it has walking, flying, climbing, and swimming, which is a common thing for players. And you can set the speed, you can set the title of it, you can set whether it's in feet or, whatever you want. And from here, you can actually set, the default values for players if you want to do that. We can also change the position. So maybe we'll set it to that so it centers it a little bit. We can save that, and now that looks a little better. And then we went into what is called the basic value component, and being able to kind of manipulate and modify the basic value component to show off basic things. Like I just have a number I want to display, or maybe I have a text that I want to display. And those things are pretty important to use is kind of like the basic fundamentals of setting up some of the sheets. And then I talked about the conditions, and you can actually set this right here, the conditions component will let you set up the conditions, just what conditions are available. You can actually say, I want to allow all of them, or I want to specify specific ones. Can they add custom ones? You can set that up. And this just gives you the condition modifiers. It gives you a preview of what the condition is. And you can actually set modifiers directly on this if you have something that you're trying to do specifically for this. We'll go into the conditions more in detail later. Oh, and I should probably talk about one of the second most important things, which is player sheets versus NPC sheets. I'm sorry, this is kind of like all over the place. So maybe I'll throw a highlight together of like specific things that I think are really important. Player sheets are, typically driven by a user that it only ever plans on using that one sheet throughout their entire session, no matter what map they are on, no matter where they are. Their hit points are their hit points, or their hit points, no matter what and where they're going. NPCs oftentimes are, goblins and trolls and what have you, and they have individual names and hit points and various conditions and things like that based on the map they're on. And I talked about the root field name and how important that is. The second thing is something called token override. When you are building an NPC sheet, you'll see when I go to the NPC sheet here and I go to my bio, the token override is set to true. And the reason for that is that when I place this I use this character to place as a token on a map, this token override will tell the entire Questline system that any changes I make to that token are for that specific token on that specific map. And I will show you how that works. So when I have an NPC, right? I'll just create an NPC for the sake of this. I'm going to save this. When I'm editing my character here inside of the pull-out character menu, this is the base name of this entire sheet, right? My settings, this is what I call it. This is the, the easy to see name that I see. This is the name that shows up over the token. And when I drag this, when I change this, if I change NPC to say, goblin, right? Even though settings still says NPC, I go back, it still says NPC here, which is exactly what I would expect. Maybe I'll change this to say goblin now. Save it, and I'll go back. And now that says goblin there. When I change this, if I were to change it to kobold, that means this is officially just known as kobold for the purposes of the tokens. For all tokens that you drag. If I drag this goblin to the map, I will zoom in. You can see his name. It says goblin. Because I set that token override, this right here will now allow me to change the goblin to say goblin number 1. And this token is now named goblin number 1, but goblin over here is still goblin. It will never be anything other than goblin until I change it. Token override works on every single component in the character sheet. When I decide that I want to set something up as a token override, that means tokens control the values of this. They default to whatever the original character sheet had, and when the moment you make a change, they will forever have those new values, and they will never get any changes from the main character sheet ever. You've essentially detached that specific component, that specific component in the character sheet from the main data until the end of time. Now, you can delete the token and put a new token down, and that new token will then have all the recent changes and updates and all the things that you have. The way I tend to set up an NPC sheet is that the bio is a token override, the hit points is a token override, and maybe something like something very specific to that token that I want to change. But most everything I leave as not. So if I like this has a speed of 30, I wouldn't set this to token override. I would actually set that to false, because most of the time the speed is never changing for that specific token. You can, and and that's why they did this, is because they wanted it to. For initiative, that kind of stuff, it's never really going to change. Your basic attributes, your basic things are never really going to change. Your character's name or the NPC name, the hit points, like the things that you want to track per token is what the token override is for. And it may be a bit more of like kind of the advanced thought behind Questline, but it really does give you, as a player, or sorry, as a game master and somebody who's building a game type, the ability to control what the token actually controls in terms of values. So that is a very important tool that you have at your disposal, and that you should always try to set that up so that you do it. For most games, and I'll show you straight up, let me go to the D&D game and show you a really good example. When I go to the NPC, you'll see my NPC has token override for the bio, not for the attributes, not for this, not for that, not for initiative, not for armor class. Hit points is yes. The skills, no. The actions are no. The features are no. The conditions are yes, because you want to track conditions per token. And then inventory can sometimes be a useful thing to say track per thing, because maybe I want to drop 5 tokens down on the board and I want to track inventory individually for them. So this is a really good way to manage all of those pieces so that your tokens on the board kind of match what you're really going for. Go back to Pathfinder. All right. So I've been talking long enough. I think the stream has gone on. I have probably gone over so much information that I'm sure some people are looking at me dumbfounded and saying, Elfric, you're killing me with all the things. And this is the advanced part of Questline, and why I'm trying to get into some of these details, because I know that there are some people who really want this info. And you can see how powerful the system really is underneath the covers. And I want to try to explain it so that people have a better way to do it. I plan on doing a round 2 of the Pathfinder. I would like to go through some more of these things. I will walk through like setting up the skills, and we'll go into things like how the actions work. Because a lot of things like, here's these melee strikes, and I have they have this whole section for feats. I have a whole section for weight and wealth and all that kind of stuff. All your spells and all your cantrips, and then a lot of the details that you want to track so that you can keep your character sheet pretty tidy. But a lot of these things can be built into things like the actions. All of these melee strikes, range strikes, most of the spells you can track as individual actions. And that's the whole point of the action system, is that you can bake all of that stuff in there, and then players can just have actions on their character sheet, and bam, I'm going to roll a die and it's going to dump out all my information on the chat. That's kind of the intention of it, is to, again, reduce the amount of like stuff that you're looking at. And character sheets can be pretty bloated. As just a prime example, I can pull up a character sheet that I pulled from D&D Beyond of my character. And when I look at this character sheet, when I first glance at it, it's not so bad. This looks pretty good. But then I run into this thing where I start seeing, oh my goodness, I have a lot of actions. And this isn't, this is a 10th level character. If you had a 20th level character in D&D, you'd have, probably twice as many. But then you get into things like all the features, all of the pieces that belong to my character and all the features. And so, being able to reduce these things is a really important kind of thing so that I don't have to look at everything all the time. And, my items, my inventory, I have a bunch of items in my inventory. Do I have them equipped? How much, whatever. There's just a lot. And so when you're trying to build this kind of stuff, and that's why I think actions are so important, because actions are a way for you to set up things like this is Misty Step, right? This is a spell, and I can very easily see, it's a bonus spell, second level. It's a class spell. It's conjuration, has a verbal component. One bonus. It's a bonus action, and it's instantaneous, and it's a teleportation tag. Gives me some details. Perfect. I can see all of that information, but my action was able to kind of contain all of this stuff. And when you're setting up your game, you can do that by coming into the prefab actions as a game master and set up a lot of those spells and a lot of those things. And if you create those things, share it with the community, because then the community can have these, essentially a library of all of these like available pieces. Now, obviously, if it's copyrighted information, please don't do that. Don't share copyrighted stuff. That's not fair. But if it's in like an SRD, absolutely share that stuff. Help people set their games up quicker. But things like hold monster or even like fireball or something like that, which is a very common thing that other players are going to do. Because if I wanted to be like, oh, I want to add a thing, I want to add a prefab fireball. Now my character has fireball. Like, it was that easy for me to do. And now I can click on it and roll it as my character, and here's a fireball. Now it doesn't have any of the spell information, but you kind of get the drift. You can also edit it, delete it from your character sheet. Again, that's simple. That kind of stuff is really easy to do. But when you're setting up your game type, setting up all your skills and all your descriptions and all the things, like this is kind of like where you're kind of playing both worlds of setting up your game type so that it has pretty much the basic details of your character sheet and a lot of the information you need to know. And then you go to your game and you're setting up specifics like, what spells are available, what items are available, that kind of stuff. That stuff can change very easily. At some point, I do want to add a whole system that adds actions, like a whole bunch of prefab actions as part of the game type as well, so that you can build things like the SRD into things like the D&D 5th edition rule set. But that's a whole other when I get to it. Again, I have a million things on my list. So I've rambled long enough, and I've talked about a lot of things, and I really appreciate everybody that has sat here and watched me for the last hour and 45 minutes talk about some of the game type systems, some of the things that are going on, some of the understanding, like some of the blocks of how the game type system works. In episode 3 of the Questline Tavern, I will go over some more of the game type system, and we'll get into some more of the skills or into some more of the components, things like the skill component and the action component and some of the other pieces, and try to really flesh out the rest of the Pathfinder 2 character sheet and get it kind of up to snuff. And in the meantime, I'll do some research on the Pathfinder 2 rule set so that I can actually have some information to be able to work from. And as I said before, if you haven't followed us on YouTube or Threads or TikTok or any of the streaming platforms, on Twitch and even Facebook, I'm streaming to all 3 platforms right now. Please follow us somewhere. Come to our Discord channel. Come talk to me. I'm on there all the time. I would love to talk to people. I love talking about people's games and hearing about their adventures and how Questline really helped people. Things that we can do to improve. And again, ways to reduce the friction. It's really important to be able to play the game that you want to play with minimal headaches. So with that, I think we will call it an evening. Thank you for stopping by. Your table, your story, your way. Let's keep playing. Let's show each other love and give each other wonderful adventures to play from. And until the next time, I'll see you around. Thank you very much for stopping by.